So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, the recently signed OBBB, or One Big Beautiful Bill, had some big repercussions in the solar industry. It eliminates the 30% tax credit for residential solar and adds restrictions for the 30% tax credit for commercial solar. And it's important to note that commercial solar also includes leases and power purchase agreements, or PPAs, on a home. So even home solar, if it's financed, there's going to be some limitations there. So effectively, the price for cash and loan purchases of solar is going to go up 30% on January 1st, 2026. Solar leasing's more complicated. There'll be increases and changes in those prices. And there's also all kinds of other weird terms. There's domestic content rules where the equipment's made, something called safe harbor considerations regarding when the equipment's bought, foreign entity of concern issues related to product that is made in countries that may be considered unfriendly to the U.S., and lots of pricing changes. So there's a lot of outstanding changes. We're not sure what they're going to be, but nevertheless, every solar contractor that I know is working like crazy to get systems installed by the end of this year. And for that reason, I think 2025 is going to be a record year for solar and battery installations. And the smart companies, the ones that are going to be survivors, are really planning now for 2026. And that raises two questions. First, what should solar contractors do to succeed in 2026 and beyond? And what should solar and battery customers consider when evaluating products and installers? This week's guest is Tom Werner, who built the largest solar company in the world, SunPower. I've known him since, 2003, 2004. He was the CEO and chairman of the board from 2003 to 2020 at SunPower. They made the best, highest efficiency solar modules. They were the largest commercial installer. They became the largest utility solar installer all around the world. And we were really, really happy to use their high efficiency panels for many years. He rode the solar coaster up, down, and sideways. And now he's an investor in energy companies and a fellow board member at CALSSA. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. And it's an honor to have you here on the Energy Show. I don't want to make you blush or anything, but you're a legend in the industry. So it's a pleasure for us and an honor.
I thought he was going to say you're a legend in your own mind.
That's what I always say. That's my line.
Very kind of you to say that.
Yeah. Plus the fact that I have a face for radio, and that's why this isn't on video.
That makes two of us.
Yeah. All right. So first, a lot of people may be wondering what you're doing. Tell us about some of your current activities.
So I retired in April of 21, and I thought, I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm in energy. I can help energy startups. So I naively said, this is going to be awesome. And so I got involved with a whole bunch of startups, a company called CALSSA that does hydrogen, a company called Flow that does EV charging, even Web3 blockchain via sciences, a broad range of mainspring, does linear generators. And I've learned a lot. Then I took managing a public semiconductor company for 6 months. That ended in May. So I'm in the PTSD period where I'm kind of slowing down and being a little more selective, but I'm still investing, still advising, still involved with energy companies.
Well, a lot of people are going to wonder, and I watched this specifically from, once you took over for Dick Swanson and transitioned into the rooftop business. What was the key to SunPower's growth, and what challenges did you face as the company grew?
First of all, great people. That's the key to any company, having great people. And then I think it's anticipating change and making moves before the change is obvious, or otherwise known as transitions. SunPower transitioned from a cell manufacturer to a module manufacturer to a developer, utility scale, residential, commercial, fully vertically integrated to ultimately at the end we separated and we're both a manufacturer and Sunrun-like company. So I think it's anticipating change and making change happen before it's obvious. And we went through massive change. At the beginning, there was a worldwide shortage of polysilicon. Remember, the ITC was extended yearly, so it may feel terrible that with the 10-year went away. That was an incredible thing. We were every year. Policies came and went all over the United States, all over the world. And just one last example, utility scale solar went from an incredible cash machine to a commodity to the beautiful business it is now for the select few that really got it right.
Yeah, I mean, those two things, great people and anticipating change, I can't agree more. And there's just so many people at SunPower who, are still in the industry that are just absolutely stars at pretty much anything that they do and doing really well.
It's really, really great, gratifying to see that. And their actions speak for themselves. They're doing wonderful things.
Yeah. And then, the anticipating change speaks directly to what we're encountering right now. And that change, it hasn't happened yet, but it's really going to have a big impact on every part of the solar value chain. And that's why I'd love to get your insights.
Yeah, I think sometimes change, you intuit that it's coming, and then there's other times where it's coming. And this is the latter. Yeah. Just like NEM 3.
Yep.
We know it's coming.
Yeah, we know. All right. So let's talk about specifically the OBBB. What impact do you think it's going to have on rooftop solar and batteries over the next 5 years?
So I think, like NEM 3, there is price elasticity. So if you take the tariff and lower it by 80%, you're going to have a lot less demand, roughly 80%, as it turned out. If you take away 30% of the economics, you're going to have a lot less demand. So loan and cash next year go down dramatically. Let's say roughly by half. TPO, on the other hand, of course, as everybody knows, continues to have the tax credit, so TPO does great. So I think that's the next year or two, and safe harbor changes whether or not you can do safe harbor, make it longer, and if you can't, of course, then it's that time frame. I think when I go out 5 years, which is what I like to do, how are we going to do the near term, and then what do we see in the future? I think the future is incredibly great still. I think, as Tony Garzolini, who's fantastic solar leader, said, is I get worried when PG&E lowers rates. Well, that ain't happening. So if you do the math and say 4 to 5 years, we're going to be back to the same economics with solar, never mind that batteries, EV charging, V2G, VPP, et cetera, are all getting better and better.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic 5 years, near term. It's going to be a smaller market. Strong are going to survive. Adjust now.
Yeah, and it's also going to be very locational dependent. We're both lucky and unlucky being where the rates are the highest in the country just about. So I think California is going to do well, but if you got a state where the electric rates are really low, there's going to be more challenges there.
Yeah, and of course my comments are in aggregate.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about specific things that an existing solar dealer or contractor has been doing, and how should they change, and how should they figure out what they want to do?
So first, I'm a big believer that the home is going to electrify, and that as it electrifies, and it's sort of obvious it is, it's a question of degree, and as it electrifies, it becomes more complicated and software driven. And we go from back when I started that you just paid your energy bill and you didn't even think about it, to now you have an energy solution for your entire home. And there's going to be a period of time like now that will go on for a few years where that's really hard to figure out. So I think solar contractors or dealers, those that are good at those sorts of things, can think of 3 years down the road how they're going to be the home electrification company, or Cinnamon Solar is now Cinnamon Energy Solutions. Is that right?
Energy systems, yeah.
Energy systems. So I think the contractors can morph into being not a solar company, but an electrification solutions company, and not all will be good at that.
Yeah, that was our strategy when we changed the name, and then the heat pumps really took off, and so we built a heat pump business, and now our trucks will say we make electrification easy. But just advice for anybody that's thinking about doing it, putting regular solar panels on the roof with a string inverter and limited monitoring, that was kind of cool, but pretty straightforward. You just got 2 or 3 wires to pull down from the roof. Then the next step was doing batteries, where you really have to get inside the home electrical service, and you have to be an electrician to do that, plus the configuration. That was more complicated. Now when we're doing heat pumps, it's just a whole nother realm of trickiness. But I 100% agree with you that it should at some point all be integrated. But the software is both a tool and an impediment to doing that, because when I look at my cell phone, I've got probably 20 different apps handling different things in my house, and at any given time, 1 or 2 of them aren't working right.
Yeah, we haven't solved it yet. And, if you're a homeowner, you're going to look for somebody to say, how am I going to make all this work?
Yeah, yeah. And we have customers that just say, all right, I want you to electrify my whole home. It's a Silicon Valley thing, probably. Here's a check for $80,000, and we pull up with 4 trucks, and over 3 days, the house is done. Those are whales. Those are unusual, but that's what's going to happen more and more. And when people want to replace their old furnace, their air conditioner dies, absolutely the time to put in a heat pump. And then when you do that, you're going to want to have solar, and you're going to have a battery, so you have power at night. So it all fits together seamlessly. Then we just have the issue of kind of getting over all the hoops that the utilities throw in front of us to slow us down. So let's talk about, let's say you're a solar contractor or solar and battery contractor. What should you be doing now so that you can succeed? Anything more specific?
A lot. So I think the beauty of, there isn't a lot of beautiful in the OBBB, but it's clarity. We have clarity. And so in some businesses, you call that the brutal truths. What are the brutal truths? And we know that the ITC is going away, and therefore we know that business is going to contract to a degree in the near term. So you need to be honest with yourself as a contractor with, that's going to happen. How are we going to deal with it? And I think alternatively, you need to look 3 years down the road and say, what do we want to be? What's our vision for the future? And then reflect on, what are you good at? What are your core competencies? And then objectively evaluate over the next 6 to 12 months, because in the next 6 to 12 months, make hay when the sun's shining. But then during that time frame, have an objective assessment. Are you making progress towards your 3-year vision? And do you have those core competencies? Because if you don't, sell. Because once it's obvious that you don't, you're not going to get anything. So if you objectively evaluate what it takes to succeed through your 3-year vision, and hopefully it goes great and you make that 3-year vision, but have the objectivity and the leadership skills to pull the ripcord when it's not happening.
Oh, and then along the same lines, during that time frame, as you had pointed out, make sure you hire the best people where you don't have to be, the motivating force dealing with everything at the company.
Well, all of us that have run businesses know we don't know everything. And so that's actually a good thing. Hire great people. And of course, people say hire people smarter than you, and then leverage that, and then listen to them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the keys that you've had at SunPower, and that I'm trying to do at my much smaller company here.
Yeah, I would say that if I were a solar contractor, you have a clear fork in the road. You know that the economics are going to change. So obviously you're going to harvest as much as you can in the near term. But then as you look to the future, you have a choice. You can be the low-cost provider. You can become a home electrification company. You can become a storage company that, oh, by the way, does solar. You could be a TPO storage company. So these are examples of sort of looking out and saying, what are you going to be? And then objectively evaluating, how do you get there, and are we getting there? And if the answer is no, then be honest about that and make a change with the company.
And one of the good things about kind of being honest is the numbers will tell you whether or not it's working. And so, I'm always looking at the financial statements and pulling the QuickBooks data and looking at, are we profitable doing what we're doing? And if we're investing in new categories, are we starting to see a return on that, or is it just a black hole? And for us, we ended up pulling out of the commercial business because we saw that changing, because the AB 2143 meant that we had to be a prevailing wage contractor, and it just wasn't cash flow positive for us.
Yeah, I think as a leader, when you have a clear picture of what you believe what the path to success will be, that's when you're comfortable, and that's when it's execution, and you evaluate execution. When you don't have that clear path, don't sleep.
Yeah, the sleeping pills don't solve the fundamental problem, which may be the business isn't good. All right, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned TPO. Let's talk a little bit about how you see third-party ownership and leases and PPAs thriving over the next few years and going into the future, and then how you see the cash deals are going to be.
Well, I'll deal with cash in the near term. I think that the economics, of course, of cash and loan are going to be materially worse at the end of the year, after the end of the year, which will cause the overall market to contract for cash and loan materially, 30% plus or more. This is what I read and what I believe. However, there are pockets of business, pockets of geographies where the owner, the buyers of the systems have other goals and have other sources of capital and who will electrify their home. So if you're fortunate to be in one of those areas, then make hay when the sun's shining. In terms of TPO, I did have a chance to catch up with Guthrie Dundas from Palmetto, very, very smart guy. And we talked about the future of TPO, and of course it's great for storage, and maybe there's a way to find storage to be the lead and solar comes on, and maybe that gets figured out. Guthrie didn't say it would be. But what he did say was TPO works depending on three things: cost, the utility rate, the cost to install, and the amount of sunshine. And the other things don't matter as much. That's really what drives the economics. So I would say to you, by the way, as a contractor, if you want to do TPO, do it with somebody like Palmetto. They have scale. They know what they're doing. You have to qualify to work with them. As we look to beyond the implementation of One Big Beautiful Bill, I think as rates go up, we cross a point where TPO economics work again. And a company like Palmetto is looking at electrification just like Cinnamon, and they'll finance all of the above. So I think what we're going to see is TPO works long-term, led by storage, eventually becomes TPO for all of the home.
Now, one of the big uncertainties that's out there, and everybody's using that uncertainty word, but there's an executive order that's coming out maybe next week, who knows, sometime mid-August, in addition to everything else that's happening in Washington. But that executive order may change some of the terms that would go into affecting the pricing and the costing of TPO. I think there'll be a lot more clarity in a week or two, but I'm not tremendously confident that the current administration is going to be favorable to solar and batteries.
Well, if you were going to bet, you would definitely bet not favorable, because that was the reason for the executive order. It was late in the negotiation deal of we'll get back to this, we'll do an executive order and reevaluate and make it harder.
That was a Chip Roy's requirement. He said,
yes.
we're kind of allowing solar leasing, but promise me that you're going to do something to kind of screw it up later, and that's what the executive order tried to do.
I think that mostly drives safe harbor in how long you have the ITC for lease. And that could be 0 or that could be a few years. If it's a few years, if you do the compounding of the utility rates, I think you get to a point where maybe the economics work at the end of the 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. I'm confident that the economics for pretty much everything are going to work at the end of 3 or 4 years. The battery costs are going to come way down. The solar panel costs probably going to come down a little bit. Labor rates might go up, who knows. But we can count on the faithful utilities to continue to raise rates, and that's going to happen.
I would like to say necessity is the mother of innovation. We have a necessity here, and we have to get cost out. So the equipment manufacturers have shown they will get cost out. SunPower did. The battery companies are. Racking companies have. And I think the need for that is ever more clear, and I think that will happen. Utilities will continue to raise rates. There'll be a crossover point where the math still works. Let's
talk a little bit from the installer's perspective again, but selecting equipment, and Palmetto probably has a list of what the approved vendors are, and so other companies do. But what's your advice after being a manufacturer for so many years, and then also an installation company? How should an installer go about selecting equipment for the long term?
This is formed by one of my pet phrases that I use as CEO, which is capitalism works. And so as solar it went from 2 gigawatts to almost 700 today, 2 when I started to 700. And that attracted massive competition. And so if you look at battery BESS, there are dozens of suppliers. There's a handful that matter that are going to scale. So the key word here to me is future-proof. Now that's future-proof. Are they going to be there to service the product? It's future-proof for features, because most of this differentiation now is software. And so are they going to put the money into the software that integrates with the electrified home and allows you to differentiate on their features? So future-proof, both are they going to be there for service and on features?
Yeah, I would get literally 1 or 2 battery manufacturers hitting my email every day, and that's kind of tapered off a little bit. This is over the last year. And a lot of really good, robust companies would come and they want to meet with us. And I would always ask them one question. I'd say, how many employees do you have right now programming and providing customer service? And if it's just like 3 or 4, they're never going to really be able to scale up to the point at which they're going to need to. If they're part of another really big company that has an army of programmers, then they can actually design something pretty much at the product release that's really going to work, be scalable, and then be expandable.
You don't want to be their test bed.
No. And you even get really big companies and maybe big solar module companies that say we're coming out with a battery, but unless they have that army of smart programmers who can really get everything working and coordinated, it's really tough.
It's very hard to be good at everything. So a module company making a battery or a module company making a battery and financing, I think at the scale the industry is now, there's specialization. So have that vendor, and for that matter, the contractor, that you believe will be there for the long term and will innovate.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I'd say there's only about half a dozen companies that make really good quality battery systems that have the scale and have the software and have the background to succeed. A bunch of them are headquartered here in Silicon Valley. A bunch of them are Chinese. The Chinese products are great. I don't know what's going to happen with FIAC, but there's a good handful of companies that any installer should look at very carefully.
FIAC would be another thing to future-proof.
How do you do that?
Well, we don't know what the rules are, but we do know 55%, going to 75%. And so regardless of the rules, that's going to be really hard. So there maybe is one that you can have confidence in the near term. And as you think forward, you need to have an answer to how are you going to get to FIAC compliance.
Well, the only way to do that is to make batteries in the U.S.
Correct. Or everything but the cell.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know what the rules are, so we don't know how the accounting will be done. But it's clear that you're going to have to do a lot in the U.S.
Yeah, when I start talking to the companies that are looking into this, their head must be absolutely spinning off their neck when they're trying to figure out all the details of FIAC and the changes and where they're getting the aluminum from and where the cell's coming from and where the...
We didn't even talk about tariffs.
What's a tariff? Let's talk about tariffs, too.
Well, I think the complexity, I mean, in my time frame, we went through a tariff and anti-circumvention, and then everything outside of America is tariffed, which included SunPower. Then there were exemptions. And so if you want to be completely comfortable with future-proof, then you meet FIAC. And then if you meet FIAC, you don't have tariffs or you have minimal tariffs, except for that which you import. And I don't know how you future-proof the current administration, how you predict what tariff there will be and for how long. So built-in flexibility, have more than one source.
I would just say the easiest answer and probably the least expensive at the end of the day is have your president or your prime minister build a hotel with somebody's name on it, and then you'll get an exemption.
Do a deal.
Well, see, that's just kind of that's the environment out there.
Yeah. So there's always been headwinds and challenges. That's why we call it the solar coaster. We have plenty now.
Well, we have plenty, but you and I 100% agree that we are by far and away the cheapest way of making electrons, and they can be deployed anywhere, any roof, any field, anywhere around the world.
Do the majority of Americans want choice? Yes. Do the majority of Americans want control? Yes. Do the majority of Americans want to pay reasonable economics? Yes. Those three things are offered by distributed energy, by solar, by batteries. And there'll be this change. There'll be a transition where that's harder, but that'll be true again.
Yeah, we're going to get there. All right. So what about, if you were a solar homeowner looking for batteries, what advice would you have for homeowners when it comes to selecting contractors?
Go with somebody like Barry. I've been around a while, know what they're doing, going to be honest about what they're selling you, going to be there to service it. I think the one thing that I advise people, because I get a fair number of people, I say, who should I work with? One of the things I've added is who's going to service the system in the long term, and not just the TPO provider, some high-level answer. Who for the TPO provider and who's their backup? Because another facet, I spoke to a number of dealers in preparation for this podcast, some really great people, Jeff Parr and John Berg and Vince, of course, from Renault.
All of whom are great, and send any business if anybody's interested in a system over the hill. The solar technologies is great, and Vince is terrific in Arizona and Nevada.
Exactly, complementary footprints. One interesting thing came up. There will probably be a lot less solar contractors, and there's 1.3 million systems installed in California. Therefore, there'll be a lot of orphan systems. There's probably a whole bunch of things that spawns, but one of them is if you're a homeowner, you're buying a system, know who's going to service it in the long run. And then if you're a contractor, is there a business opportunity there? Because there's going to be a lot of people calling.
I'll tell you what the business opportunity is. Service is a losing business proposition. You know, by the time we roll a truck with a qualified technician, I mean, these technicians are people that have been in the business for 15 years. They know everything about everything, and they can fix pretty much anything, but they're expensive. So they're the most expensive field people that we have. So the trick is to figure out a way to make money on that. You have to charge a fair amount for each service call, and you also have to be able to upsell them on future things. And it's the upselling that really makes the business work.
Yeah, you create a long-term business relationship. I think also for the contractors, it will highlight quality contractors, that I'll be here in the long run. I do business the right way. I've been here a long time. I'm local, reputable. I service what I install. Those things will become more and more important as we transition over the next few years.
Yeah, and it kind of gets like the HVAC business. The HVAC companies make a lot of money on service and upgrades because they've been doing it forever. They have that list of customers that they can feed. The solar contractors don't have as many, so we're really forced to make sure that we actually charge a lot for that initial service call and then be as helpful as we can for upsells.
As you upsell, I wonder if there is an opportunity to repower systems.
There's a lot of repowering going on. Everybody wants to add solar panels, but that's tricky. It's really constrained by the CPUC. But repowering, sometimes, even if you were to put the same number of watts on, the older system's not going to perform as well. It's probably down to like 60% performance, so it makes a lot of sense. All right, so any other advice you have for whether they're contractors or homeowners or just high-level industry participants?
We haven't talked about CALSSA, but solar is policy-driven. That's legislation and regulation. So if you're a contractor or a future owner of a solar system, do your homework on policy. Policy, we can just look to the transition from NEM2 to NEM3 and know the importance of policy. And there's all kinds of things going on now. Great work being done by CALSSA. Barry and I are board members there. They do the heavy lifting for the contractors if you're a member, and you really should be a member because it's incredibly economic, and you're a policy maker, not a policy taker, at least to a degree. And as a homeowner, as a potential buyer of systems, unfortunately, you do need to know that part of the business as well.
And so just regarding CALSSA and some advice I got from just people in the industry way back is when you're involved with your local solar association, your state level solar association, you're learning about future policies. That really helps you with the crystal ball so you can anticipate changes. I knew for 2 years in advance that net metering was going to change, and that really, really helps. So CALSSA is great. Any other state association is great.
Yeah, we said that at the beginning of the podcast, is anticipating change and then being there when the change happens so you can capitalize on it.
Yeah.
When I ran SunPower, when I led the SunPower team, I said, change is your friend. If there wasn't change, we're a commodity, and we're selling only on price. So as change happens, I used to say companies win in transition. So if there's transitions, that's a chance to separate yourself and be better. And so embrace that.
It's no coincidence that, I speak to some of my friends. There's a guy named Dan Sugar, there's a guy named Howard Wenger, and there's a lady named Julie Blunden. And, everybody just said having Julie there helping with that crystal ball made a tremendous difference on at least the U.S. business and probably overseas. I wasn't involved in that.
I couldn't spell policy until Julie came to the company. She taught me everything.
Yeah. I just watched it, how effective it was, both at PowerLight when they started, and it manifested itself when PowerLight merged in with SunPower, and really it's important. And then you have the National Association, SEIA, which is also good to a certain degree. If you're a homeowner, there's an organization called the Solar Rights Alliance, and that's free to join. And basically that's a grassroots organization that's there to help with getting solar-friendly policies in place. And it's an army of people, many more people are going to call up legislators and the governor saying, hey, this would be good. And it worked kind of all over the country.
If you're a homeowner and you're thinking, my rates have gone up, this is insane, why can't I produce my own power, my own energy? I heard solar's great, but the utility is making it difficult. There's your chance.
Yeah, and those are great advice for both for installers and, look up the Solar Rights Alliance if you're in the California, West Coast area, and there's similar alliances on the East Coast. Well, let's just kind of towards the end here. What prompted you to kind of move from networking into solar?
I was at a startup, so I was transitioning from networking to large-scale networking, fiber optic components. And TJ Rogers had made an investment in SunPower, and I met Dick Swanson and his team, and they blew me away. They blew me away two different ways. One, in terms of their competence. So they did things because they were theoretically right, not trial and error. They knew designing the back contact solar cell. They were modeling the movement of an electron. They knew it in incredible detail. And they were doing it because they wanted to change the world. This was right after the technology bubble of 2000, 2001. And I'd say, why did you stay here? And they'd look at me like, you don't get it. We're changing the world. So who wouldn't want to join that?
Yeah, and you got to join at the right level. And I remember really early on, you started to build that team. And
we had a massive market barrier. It was worldwide, 2 gigawatts.
I was one of the very first dealers, proud to have the SunPower with hats and T-shirts and, logos on the truck. All right, what are you doing for fun now? I remember you used to travel around with your bicycle.
Yeah. Well, first, 4 grandchildren, 2 to 6. They live in Willow Glen, 2 of them with, of course, their family, and 2 in Mill Valley. That's just unbelievable. I go to a lot of music. Just was at Outside Lands this past weekend. And then I swim, bike, and run still. Not as fast, but I still do all 3. And I can do more of that, all 3 of those things now at this point in my career.
Are you going to start winning those senior citizen triathlons now?
Well, no doubt, because many of them I'm the only one in my age group.
Oh, all right. Okay.
They say, Barry, choose your competition wisely.
Yeah, just live long and prosper. You'll get there.
Ideally, there are no competitors. Yeah.
All right. How can people get in touch with you?
I have a LinkedIn profile, so that's best. That's generic. You can find me there. Many people know my email. Barry does as well. Or you can network. I can be easily found, but LinkedIn's the best way.
Yeah, that's terrific. Okay. Well, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks, Tom, for joining us. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.